Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling a really significant issue,
Mhm.
growing homelessness right here in the US.
Yeah, it's something you hear about a lot more lately.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So, to get a better handle on it, we've got some interesting source material. First up, a graph from Econ Effect.
Okay.
It seems to draw a pretty clear line between homelessness and, well, how much housing costs.
That makes sense intuitively.
Right. And then we're going to dig into a YouTube video transcript. It's from a channel called Real Estate Mindset.
Ah, okay. A different angle.
Yeah, quite a different take, actually, on the housing market itself. So our goal here, is to try and understand what's really driving this increase in homelessness.
And maybe cut through some noise. There seem to be conflicting stories.
Exactly. Help you navigate those different explanations out there.
All right. Well, the trend is definitely concerning. If you look at the latest HUD data, that's the Department of Housing and Urban Development, Econ Effect cites their January 2025 report. It shows a record number.
Correct.
Yeah, 771,480 people experiencing homelessness just on one night in 2024.
Wow. That's a lot of people.
It is. And it's an 18% jump from 2023
18% in 1 year.
in 1 year. And maybe the most worrying part, over a third of them, 36%, were unsheltered.
Living on the streets, in parks.
Exactly, without even basic shelter.
Those numbers are hard to grasp sometimes, but then you hear personal stories like Tyler's story in that Real Estate Mindset video.
Right, you mentioned him.
Yeah, he's got a full-time job, he's working, and yet he's homeless.
Because he can't afford rent,
Just can't afford it.
Huh.
He says the average one bedroom is around $1,500 a month,
which is a lot, depending on your income.
for sure. And he points out over 30 million Americans make less than $15 an hour.
So, yeah, you do the math. $1,500 rent on less than $15 an hour.
It just doesn't work. It squeezes everything else out.
Well, and that affordability piece is really central to the Econ Effect analysis. Their main point is basically that homelessness numbers go up and down pretty closely with how available affordable housing is.
So supply and demand, but specifically for affordable places.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And they show this interesting trend. After the 2008 crash, when housing costs and rents kind of fell compared to what people earned.
Yeah, things get a bit cheaper for a while.
Right. And homelessness actually went down.
Huh, okay.
But then, starting around 2017, housing costs started climbing again, sharply.
And that's when homelessness started rising too.
Exactly. That's the correlation they point to.
And the graph they have makes that pretty visual, doesn't it?
It really does. You see the line for the number of homeless people,
Mm-hmm.
and it tracks almost perfectly with these other lines showing median rent compared to median income and house prices compared to median income.
So as housing eats up a bigger chunk of people's paychecks,
You see more homelessness. It suggests a really strong link.
okay, that seems pretty straightforward. But then the other perspective.
Right. The real estate mindset video.
Yeah.
They come at it very differently.
Yeah, they challenge this whole idea of a massive housing shortage. They actually call the idea of needing 4 or 5 million more homes a lie.
A lie. That's strong language.
It is. They suggest that narrative is, maybe pushed by people who stand to gain financially.
Okay, so what's their evidence against a shortage?
Well, this is where it gets kind of counterintuitive. They point to Census Bureau data, and they claim there are 15 million vacant homes in the country.
15 million.
Vacant.
That's the number they use. And they break it down further, saying 11.5 million of those are vacant year-round.
Wow. Okay, that definitely makes you question the dire shortage story.
Right. And they also look at active listings. They said in March, it was about 892,000.
And how does that compare?
They say it's really close to where things were before the pandemic, which was around 928,000.
So not millions short, maybe just tens of thousands, according to them.
Yeah, they suggest the actual gap might be more like 60 or 70,000 homes, not millions. Interesting. Do they have other points on supply?
They do. They point out that the number of new single-family homes being finished has actually been going up for the last 13 years straight.
So completions are rising.
Yeah. Their argument is kind of if we were really millions of homes short, would we see builders consistently finishing more and more houses year after year?
That's a fair question, I suppose. It complicates the picture.
It really does. So you've got Econ Effect saying, look, it's about affordability linked to supply, and Real Estate Mindset saying, hold on, is the supply really the main problem? Look at these vacancies, look at completions.
It sounds like both, maybe indirectly. end up talking about affordability.
I think so, yeah. The YouTube video is very explicit about it. They say their focus isn't just inventory, it's affordability.
Okay. And how do they frame that affordability crisis?
They bring up something called the debt-to-income ratio, DTI.
Ah, right. How much of your income goes to debt payments?
Exactly. And the video claims that, traditionally, lenders like to see that around, say, 28% for a mortgage.
Yeah, that sounds about right for the old standard.
But they argue it's been pushed way higher now, maybe even up to 50% in some situations.
50%? Wow, half your income just to debts.
Yeah. And they're saying that's what makes housing unaffordable for so many people. The rules have changed.
That ties back to the cost versus income idea, just from a different angle, the financing angle.
Totally. And what's really fascinating is that the YouTube speaker actually references the Econ Effect charts.
Oh, really? Even though they disagree on the cause?
Yeah. They might debate the whole supply shortage thing, but they look at that same chart showing homeless numbers rising alongside housing costs relative to income.
Those ratios.
And they basically say, see, it is getting less affordable. They agree on that visual connection, even if they explain it differently.
So whether it's lack of supply driving up prices or financial changes making loans harder to manage, the end result is housing costs more relative to what people earn.
Seems like it. And the video adds another layer, too. They talk about inflation.
Okay.
They argue that if you adjust for inflation, the average person actually made less money in 2023 than they did in 2019.
Less real purchasing power?
Exactly, which would just make the affordability crunch even worse, right? Even if housing costs hadn't gone up quite so much.
Yeah, that would definitely compound the problem.
So the real estate mindset video really puts the blame, or at least the focus, squarely on debt and the broader financial system.
Less about building houses, more about money itself.
Pretty much. They throw out this huge number. They claim U.S. national debt is up 5,300% since 1992.
Whoa, okay.
And they compare that to, they claim, only a 400% increase in median home value over the same period.
Suggesting house prices haven't even kept pace with national debt expansion.
That seems to be their point. They argue it points to this, unsustainable market, kind of artificially inflated by all this debt.
And they connect this to the Federal Reserve.
Oh yeah, big time. They criticize the Fed's policies, saying they've helped create this artificial fraudulent market, partly by enabling those higher DTIs we talked about.
The ones making it harder for people to truly afford homes.
Right. They even sort of compare it to the lead up to 2008, calling it a new era of subprime loans, just maybe packaged differently.
That's a serious accusation, linking it to the last crisis.
It is. And they also briefly touch on other debt, like local school district bonds and even some HUD programs like the 221D4 loan program. Suggesting these things add to the overall debt and leverage in the system, but maybe don't always effectively help the low-income people they're supposed to.
Okay, so a very critical view of the financial underpinnings of the housing market.
Definitely. So, given all this, what are the actual consequences? And what about solutions? Econ Effect is pretty clear on the costs of homelessness.
Yeah, they list some grim outcomes. Higher death rates, shorter lives.
More illness, more use of ERs.
Which costs everyone money. Plus, just the societal cost of having so many people struggling.
And Econ Effect does acknowledge that the government is putting more into shelters, services.
But they also kind of caution that those things aren't a magic bullet, right?
Yeah.
And budgets are always tight.
Exactly. And interestingly, the real estate mindset video is skeptical about some solutions too, like taxpayer-funded down payment help.
Why skeptical?
They claim those programs often end up with higher foreclosure rates down the line.
Ah, okay. So maybe not the sustainable solution they appear to be.
That seems to be their perspective. So for longer-term fixes, what does Econ Effect suggest?
They really circle back to boosting the supply of affordable housing. How? Things like easing up on zoning rules that make it hard to build denser housing, or making sure there's financing available for multifamily units, apartment buildings, that kind of thing.
Makes sense, but those aren't quick fixes, are they?
No, they explicitly say it'll take time to really make a difference. Zoning changes, construction, that stuff moves slowly.
So it really underscores how complex this all is.
Absolutely. You have Econ Effect focusing on the need for more affordable units, potentially through policy changes. And then you have real estate mindset pointing fingers at, systemic financial issues.
Yeah.
Debt, the Fed.
Yeah.
Saying the problem is deeper than just inventory.
Two very different lenses to view the same crisis.
Right.
And through it all, you just can't lose sight of the human side. Look, Tyler's story.
Yeah.
It's a stark reminder these are real people working, trying, and still falling through the cracks into homelessness because housing is just out of reach.
It really grounds the whole discussion, doesn't it? It's not just charts and numbers.
Not at all.
So maybe a final thought for you listening. The real estate mindset video really pushes this idea of questioning the standard narrative.
Right, think critically.
Yeah. So if the main story you hear is we just need to build more houses, but then you see data, like they presented, about vacancies, or you look at affordability tied to wages and debt, what other things should you maybe look into? What other economic signs or specific data about your local housing market could give you a fuller picture of what's really going on with housing access and affordability where you live?
Good question. It definitely encourages you to dig a bit deeper than the headlines.
Exactly. It's worth exploring those other factors.